Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Charity Therapy. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Ellen Bristol. Ellen is an expert in fundraising strategy and operations, and she's the founder of Bristol Strategy Group, an apt name, where she works with small to mid-sized nonprofits to grow their fundraising capacity. Ellen found her place in the sector after 20 years in sales, so she knows what's up. And she's made it her mission to bring some of the key sales disciplines used in high-performing companies to the nonprofit sector. So she's doing it right, not making nonprofits be businesses, but bringing the good parts of business to us. Ellen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
All right. So, Ellen, today I have some really juicy fundraising questions for you. Are you ready to dive right into these?
I am ready.
All right. Here we go. I am going to lead us through our first question, and it is a doozy. All right. I've just finished the startup process for my new nonprofit, a homeless shelter. Now that I'm fully set up, I need to start fundraising, but I'm not sure where to start. That's typical. I've worked in the sector for a while, and I understand that fundraising for colleges, museums, and arts-based organizations might be easier since they all have stakeholders with money and motivation to give it away. But the folks experiencing homelessness don't have any capacity to give to the nonprofit. What kinds of fundraising strategies work best for small human services organizations like ours?
Okay, I'm big on strategy, as you said. So I want to start by correcting some misapprehensions the questioner has. Finding funding for any startup is always the tough part, and it really doesn't matter what sector you're in. Yes, it's true that established colleges, museums, and other culture palaces, as they're sometimes jocularly referred to.
Palaces. That's great.
Don't you love that phrase? Do attract affluent people. But what we are all wrestling with in the nonprofit sector is racial and social justice. And so one thing you have to remember about higher ed and museums and performing arts organizations and the like is they tend to appeal to a lot of rich white people.
True dat.
The other side of the setup here is that, yes, it's tough to find your first funders, but social services in general is the largest sector of the 1.5 million, give or take, registered nonprofits in the U.S. Here's the deal. Don't start by looking for funders at all. First, start doing something that'll make you feel impatient and be a little bit challenging if you're eager to go and you know there are homeless people who need help and you can't afford to help them. Force yourself and your closest allies to sit down and figure out who wants to fund you, your ideal funder profile. It's not easy, but it's so well worth it. You need to know what would motivate somebody. If you could think of somebody who's already giving to a homeless shelter elsewhere, one of the most important things to do in building that ideal funder profile is talk to other people who currently give to human services organizations in the first place. Network your brains out. So if your city has a chamber of commerce with a nonprofit committee of any kind, you don't even have to belong to the chamber of commerce. Find the money to go to a meeting of that nonprofit organization. And no matter how wary you feel about talking to strangers, make connections, right? Do it anyway. You know, grab somebody by the lapel and say, listen, I'm a newbie in the nonprofit sector and I just need some mentorship. Next thing is as you're working on figuring out which funders are most likely to give to you, even if they give at a modest level, start working to get their gifts. There's a great axiom in fundraising. If you ask for advice, you get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. So spend your first chunk of time asking for advice. Is what we're doing appealing? Why would it appeal to you? Assuming you wanted to give, how much do you think would be the right level? In this whole conversation, you are decidedly not asking for money. I mean, if somebody turns around and says, your idea sounds fabulous, here's $100, what are you going to do? Say no? You're going to say yes, of course. There are two flavors of fundraising. They're called a million different things, but there's low dollar investment fundraising, which is sometimes called transactional. And that's where you want to get a bunch of people pledging you $10 a month or writing a check for $25 or whatever it is. If any of you can still tolerate remembering the most recent presidential election, you'll know that you got 9 million requests to pay your party of choice $2 a month, right? And guess what? Yeah. Well, when Obama introduced that idea, I looked it up. He raised tens of billions of dollars that way. Billions with a B. So there are some great software products. Excuse me for making a plug, Jessica, but I love this platform. QGive, the letter QGIV.com. They run a CRM platform with all of these extra special tools for things like events, endurance events, online auctions, annual fund, the stuff that produces small dollar or transactional funding. And you can get their product for free, like forever, if you're only using it for a certain type of fundraising experience.
That's an amazing resource especially for the small startup folks, because the budget is so
startup,
tight.
It's fabulous.
I love that, because basically the two things that you've kind of highlighted throughout this answer is focusing on the customer journey, right? Which is kind of a business sales concept that you're bringing in here into a nonprofit concept, where it's like, what is the donor's journey? What is your program participant's journey? And focusing on that before you go and just try and like stab around in the dark asking people for money. That is so key. And I love that wisdom. That's awesome.
Thank you. I can tell you I've actually heartbroken over the number of nonprofit wannabes or struggling nonprofits who offer tremendous potential for impact, but they waste an unconscionable amount of time, money, and psychic energy flailing about without having direction and focus.
Well, speaking of wannabes flailing about,
go right ahead.
Let's move to our second question of the day here. I'm the president of a nonprofit, and we're starting a new program to provide health checkups to children in underserved communities. Sounds like a great mission. My vision is to have a traveling clinic that can visit schools and neighborhoods to remove barriers to care. The only problem is there are a lot of startup costs. We need funds to buy the vehicles, equipment, and a building to securely store it all. I've found the perfect building for our purposes and managed to get the contact information for the owner through a friend of a friend. I've sent several letters and emails appealing to the owner to donate the building to us or sell it to us at a steep discount, but no luck yet. Even part of the building donated would be great. I found a wealthy family foundation in an online search and have been trying to contact them about giving us a grant, but they also haven't responded. What can I do to convince these people to give? Oh, Lord, Ellen.
This is, excuse me, I have to take a moment to recover from my weeping with frustration and agony on behalf of the questioner. Okay. this is kind of a non-strategic approach, but please don't start with a building.
I know, right? I'm like, can you not just rent space?
And
why?
If you have more than a studio apartment that you share with 3 other people, you don't need anything except a laptop.
The hubris of going straight to the capital campaign after startup is hilarious to me. I get the passion, but it's like,
I get the passion too, but you're really setting yourself up to fail dramatically. And furthermore, especially in 2021, right after COVID, do you think without a track record 20 years long, somebody's going to donate a building to you or sell it for cheap? Think again. It is a seller's market out there in real estate.
Well, and just from a legal perspective, let's just say you get a bargain sale.
Or a donation.
Yeah. How's this nonprofit going to get the financing for the rest of it? You have no track record. No bank is going to make a loan to this nonprofit. So are you going to personally sign for it? And do you have the financial wherewithal to even qualify?
But the key question here to me is, what the hell do you need it for?
Well, to store these vehicles and all this stuff, apparently.
Mazel tov. Stash them in the suburbs in front of your volunteer drivers' houses. To start with, the questioner is going about this inside out backwards. First thing to do is you got to talk to the other providers of childcare, community health centers, free clinics, federally qualified health centers, which was a step up, and that most of their money comes from the federal government. I'm almost hesitant to say this, but something I really often want to say to aspiring nonprofit founders is, do you have a viable nonprofit business concept, or do you have a program?
Right? Yeah. Like, this is like the Shark Tank episode where they're like, this isn't a business, this is a product. That's nice, but it's not investable because this isn't a business. Correct. I love that analogy. And most people have seen an episode or 2 of Shark Tank. So you all know what this is.
And if you haven't, I suggest you start now. Doing anything in the healthcare arena is covered all over with all kinds of regulatory requirements. If you have an idea, your idea is to complement a health center by going to schools. Now, you have to make sure that it's legal in the community in question to provide such services.
Well, and the questioner has spent a lot of time developing their own personal vision and getting really fixated on the idea of the equipment and the building, when maybe the better strategy is to approach a large existing, say it's Children's Hospital in your area or whatever, and say, have we tried this before? I would like to try this. If I can raise X dollars, would you partner with me to try this as a beta?
Or can we host it inside your hospital?
Yeah, because guess who's already got buildings?
In which case,
healthcare.
The hospital foundation becomes the so-called fiscal agent. Can you explain that if people don't know what it means?
Oh, yeah. So fiscal agency is essentially where, a mama bird is the nonprofit that has a little baby bird in the nest. And the baby bird does not have C3 status. And the mama bird says, you can live here in my nest with my 501c3 status, and we will be responsible for you, and we will feed you and take care of you and put worms in your mouth. until you're ready to fly away on your own. Or maybe you just become a program of us because we think it's great.
And you get to be the director of the program. Oh, and guess what? You get to earn a salary and health benefits.
Right.
And if you're a startup nonprofit, getting there is like getting to the top of the mountain and getting the 10 Commandments. There's another thing I want to say. The hit or miss finding a family foundation online and trying to contact them.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about effective grant-seeking strategies. To start with, getting a grant in most instances is like getting a loan from a bank. And you usually can't get a loan from the bank unless you have established 3 years of creditworthiness, speaking very, very generally. So there are very few grant-making organizations that will grant any kind of significant money to a startup. Now, there are certainly exceptions to this rule, but the critical exceptions are startup nonprofits who have developed a business perspective that would satisfy a third-party investor. So even though we're talking nonprofit and nonprofit terms, one of the most successful nonprofits in the country, the Harlem Children's Zone, took that route. And they spent months putting together a prospectus for angel investors. And then they shopped that prospectus. They made amazing connections. For one thing, they were able, through their college contacts, to get an audience with George Soros, who said, your numbers and business proposition make sense, and I'm willing to make an investment. Notice how not easy it was. However you do this, even if your route is to go to a school system, a community health center, or a hospital system, and get them to be supportive of you, whether they become your fiscal agent, your employer, or none of the above. If they bless you, you're cool. And if you decide you want to go the grant-seeking route, you have to do the same thing I talked about with the earlier question. Figure out your prospectus, your value proposition, your case for support.
I love this because these two questions basically it's like a whole thesis. Like the entire takeaway is it's really about, don't just go looking for funders. You have to figure out who is your ideal funder, understand that profile and their donor or customer journey, and do the same thing with your beneficiaries. Like, what is the child's journey? What is the customer journey?
What is the parent's journey?
And then remembering that we have to convince our funders, just like a business needs to convince an investor. And so we have to think about the funder journey and our case for support. And all of those things build on each other, because you can't make a compelling case for support if you don't understand your participants' journeys. I think that's a really great way to sort of sum up the takeaway here for these two questions. And of course, y'all need to just get used to hearing no a lot.
Somebody said, many people have said, I can't take a rejection. And my feeling is the more you ask, the more you get rejected, the less it hurts.
Oh, absolutely.
Just one other quick resource I want to mention in response to both of these questions. Grants make up a relatively modest proportion of overall funding. Vast majority of funding comes from individual donations. But grant seeking is often very useful for social services agencies and organizations led by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. If you're going to rely on grant seeking, be smart about it. Understand what you're looking for. Subscribe to either Grant Station or the Foundation Directory. There are a number of ways to get to the Foundation Directory. It's too expensive for most nonprofits to invest in, but every community foundation in the country has a subscription. You need to start looking for grants that fund in your area. Their grant guidelines always say what they will fund and what they won't fund. So question number 2 has been trying to contact a wealthy family foundation who hasn't responded. Either they don't support organizations like yours, or even more important, they don't accept letters of inquiry. They choose their grantors.
Yeah. Well, and just continually harassing these people over and over again is probably not doing you any favor.
Yeah, well, they'll put you on the do not call list and then they call the cops, right? I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. Ellen, thank you for being here today. You are an absolute delight and an amazing expert, and I am so glad we met. How can people find you if they want to connect with you further?
Oh, I'd love it if they did. First of all, you can visit our website, bristolstrategygroup.com. My email address is ellen@bristolstrategygroup.com. We have a resource library with a lot of free downloads, and we have a survey, an online assessment that I love for people to take. It is free, by the way, and it's our Leaky Bucket assessment. You'll find it under assessments.
Leaky Bucket assessment. Get on it. Get connected. All right. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot.
All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter @JessBirkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.